poor human janitor rushed a dragon hatchling to the hospital. Days later, his life changed forever. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the dimly lit maintenance corridors of Galactic Central Station, Miles Harper pushed his mop across the endless floor, his worn uniform badge identifying him as just another replaceable human in an alien world. It was supposed to be an ordinary night shift for Miles Harper, the kind where nothing happens and the hours tick by with agonizing slowness. Working as a janitor at Interspecies Medical Center, the most prestigious hospital in the Galactic Federation, wasn't exactly what he dreamed of doing with his life. But for a 32-year-old human with no special skills and mountains of debt, options were limited. Especially since Earth had only joined the Galactic Federation 15 years ago, and humans were still at the bottom of the social hierarchy. The Interspecies Medical Center was a marvel of engineering, a massive structure that seemed to defy gravity with its twisting, organic architecture. Each section was carefully climate-controlled to accommodate the diverse needs of the galaxy's many species. Miles worked primarily in the central hub, where the gravity and atmosphere were set to Earth standard. It was easier for humans to adapt than to force other species to accommodate them, a recurring theme in galactic politics. Miles pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors of the hospital's east wing, the wheels squeaking slightly against the polished floor. The night shift was quiet, as usual, with only the occasional nurse or doctor hurrying past. Most of the medical staff barely acknowledged Miles's existence. To them, he was just another human doing menial work, practically invisible. "Evening, Harper," Dr. Krelzak said, one of the few staff members who actually bothered to learn his name. The Viridian physician had 6 eyes arranged in a circle around what would be a forehead on a human, and his blue-tinted skin seemed to shimmer under the hospital's bright lights. "Evening, Doctor," Miles replied, offering a tired smile. "Busy night." "Not particularly. A few routine procedures." Dr. Krelzak paused, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "How is your mother doing?" Miles's smile faltered. "About the same. The treatments are expensive, but they're keeping the cancer at bay." "I see." The doctor's expression was unreadable, but his voice softened. "If you need any advice on her care, my door is always open." "Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate that." As Dr. Krelzak walked away, Miles sighed. His mother's illness was the reason he was here, working double shifts whenever possible. The Federation had miraculous medical technology that could cure almost any disease, if you could afford it. Unfortunately, the cost of advanced alien medical treatments was astronomical, and insurance for humans was still a bureaucratic nightmare. Miles continued his rounds, mopping floors, emptying waste bins, and disinfecting surfaces. The work was mindless, allowing his thoughts to wander. He'd been doing this job for 3 years now, ever since moving to New Washington, the first human city built using alien technology and the primary hub for Earth's interactions with the Galactic Federation. As he turned the corner into a rarely used service corridor, Miles heard a strange sound. It was high-pitched, almost like a whimper, but with an odd resonance that didn't sound human or like any of the alien species he was familiar with. Curiosity piqued. He followed the sound down the corridor, past storage rooms and maintenance closets. The noise grew louder, more urgent. It was coming from behind a half-open door labeled Maintenance Access 7B. Miles approached cautiously, pushing the door open with his foot. The small room was cluttered with cleaning supplies and broken equipment. At first, Miles didn't see anything unusual. Then, a flash of movement caught his eye. In the corner, partially hidden behind a stack of empty containers, was what looked like a small, scaled creature. It was no bigger than a house cat, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and emerald green in the dim light. 2 tiny wings, not yet fully developed, protruded from its back, and its long, serpentine tail was curled protectively around its body. Miles stared in disbelief. He recognized the creature from educational broadcasts and news reports, though he'd never seen one in person. It was a draconian hatchling, a baby dragon. The Draconians were among the oldest and most powerful species in the Galactic Federation. They were also one of the rarest, with a notoriously low birth rate. Each hatchling was considered a precious resource for their species, celebrated across their territories with festivals and ceremonies. And somehow, inexplicably, one had ended up in a maintenance closet in the human section of the hospital. The hatchling looked up at Miles with large, golden eyes, making that pitiful whimpering sound again. Now that Miles could see it clearly, he noticed that one of its wings was bent at an unnatural angle, and there was a wound on its side that was leaking a strange, silvery fluid. The creature was injured and clearly in pain. "How did you get in here, little guy?" Miles whispered, kneeling down to get a better look. The hatchling flinched away from him, its tiny claws scratching against the floor as it tried to retreat further into the corner. It made a sound that might have been a growl if it wasn't so weak and pitiful. Miles had no idea what to do. He knew that draconians were extremely protective of their young, and interfering with a hatchling could potentially cause a diplomatic incident. But he couldn't just leave the poor thing here, injured and alone. It clearly needed medical attention. Carefully, Miles reached into his pocket and pulled out the sandwich he'd packed for his break. He unwrapped it and tore off a small piece of the turkey. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly, holding out the morsel. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The hatchling eyed the offering suspiciously, its nostrils flaring as it caught the scent. After a moment of deliberation, hunger won out over fear. It darted forward, snatched the piece of turkey from Miles's fingers, and retreated back to its corner to devour it. Miles continued to feed the hatchling small pieces of his sandwich, each time holding the food a little closer to himself. Gradually, the creature became more comfortable with his presence, and by the time the sandwich was gone, it was eating directly from his palm. "There you go," Miles said, gently stroking the hatchling's head with one finger. Its scales were smooth and warm to the touch, like sun-heated stones. "We need to get you to someone who can help you." The obvious solution was to take the hatchling to the xenobiology department, where they treated non-human patients. But as Miles considered this, a troubling thought occurred to him. How had the hatchling ended up in this maintenance closet in the first place? Draconians were extremely careful with their young, and the hospital had strict security measures. This hatchling must have been deliberately hidden here, which suggested something sinister was going on. Miles had heard rumors about black market traders who dealt in exotic creatures. Draconian hatchlings would be worth a fortune due to their rarity. What if someone at the hospital was involved? If he took the hatchling to the wrong person, he might be putting it in even more danger. As he was contemplating his options, the hatchling solved the dilemma for him. It climbed onto his arm, wincing in pain as its injured wing was jostled and settled against his chest. It looked up at him with those huge golden eyes, making a soft, trilling sound. "Okay, little one," Miles said, making his decision. "Let's get you some help." He couldn't take the hatchling through the main corridors of the hospital without someone noticing. Instead, he navigated through the service tunnels and maintenance passages that only the janitorial staff used. The hatchling remained curled against his chest, occasionally making small sounds of discomfort when they hit a bump or turned a corner too quickly. Miles had no real plan beyond getting the hatchling to someone he trusted. The only person who came to mind was Dr. Krelzak. The Viridian physician had always been kind to Miles and seemed genuinely dedicated to helping all species. When Miles finally reached Dr. Krelzak's office, he was relieved to find the light still on. He knocked softly, aware of the precious cargo he was carrying. "Come in," Dr. Krelzak called. Miles entered, closing the door quickly behind him. "Doctor, I need your help." Dr. Krelzak looked up from his workstation, his 6 eyes widening in surprise as he noticed what Miles was cradling against his chest. "Is that a draconian hatchling?" Miles confirmed. "I found it hidden in a maintenance closet. It's injured." The doctor was on his feet immediately, gesturing for Miles to place the hatchling on the examination table. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice hushed. "And concerning. Draconian hatchlings never leave their clutch guardians." As Miles gently set the hatchling down, it chirped in protest, trying to cling to his shirt. "It's okay," he soothed, keeping one hand on the creature's back while Dr. Krelzak prepared his equipment. "We're going to help you." The doctor ran a scanner over the hatchling, frowning at the results. "The wing has a clean break, but that wound on its side is concerning. It appears to have been injected with something. A tracking device, perhaps, or a sedative to keep it docile during transport. Miles felt sick at the thought. Someone was trying to smuggle it out of the hospital? It seems likely, Dr. Krelzak agreed, preparing a syringe with a clear liquid. This will neutralize any sedatives in its system and help with the pain. As the doctor administered the injection, the hatchling squirmed and let out a pitiful cry. It turned its golden eyes to Miles, seemingly pleading for reassurance. "You're doing great, little one," Miles said, stroking the hatchling's head. "Just hang in there." Dr. Krelzak worked quickly, setting the broken wing and applying a healing gel to the wound on its side. The good news is that draconians are remarkably resilient, even as hatchlings. With proper care, it should make a full recovery. "What should we do now?" Miles asked. "Contact the Draconian embassy?" The doctor's expression grew serious. "Not yet. If there's a smuggling operation involving draconian hatchlings, it could implicate high-level officials, perhaps even within the embassy itself. We need to be careful about who we trust. So what do? We can't just keep it here." Dr. Krelzak considered for a moment. "It needs specialized care while it recovers, and it seems to have bonded with you. Can you take it home with you?" Miles stared at the doctor in disbelief. "Me? I don't know the first thing about caring for a draconian hatchling." "I can provide instructions and supplies," the doctor said. "It would only be temporary, until we can determine who we can safely contact about this situation." Miles looked down at the hatchling, which had curled up on the examination table and was watching him intently. Taking care of an alien baby dragon hadn't exactly been on his to-do list for the week. But something about those golden eyes made it impossible to say no. "All right," he sighed. "What do I need to know?" By the time Miles's shift ended, he had received a crash course in draconian hatchling care from Dr. Krelzak, along with a bag of specialized food and medical supplies. The doctor had also created a makeshift carrier from a medical transport container, insulated to maintain the higher temperature that draconians preferred. "Remember, keep it warm, feed it small meals every few hours, and apply the healing gel to its wounds twice a day," Dr. Krelzak instructed as Miles prepared to leave. "I've programmed my personal communication code into your device. Contact me immediately if there are any complications." Miles nodded, trying to absorb all the information. "How long do you think we'll need to keep this secret?" "Give me 3 days to investigate," the doctor said. "By then, I should have a better understanding of the situation and who might be involved." With the hatchling safely tucked into its carrier, Miles made his way home, constantly looking over his shoulder for signs of pursuit. His apartment was in one of the less desirable areas of New Washington, where rent was cheap and neighbors minded their own business. Perfect for temporarily harboring an alien dragon baby. Once safely inside, Miles set up a cozy space for the hatchling in his living room, using blankets to create a nest on his sofa. The creature seemed exhausted from its ordeal and promptly fell asleep once it was settled. Miles collapsed into his armchair, the events of the night catching up to him. He'd just smuggled an extremely valuable alien baby out of his workplace, potentially interfering with some kind of criminal operation. Not to mention that if any harm came to the hatchling while in his care, he'd likely face serious consequences from the draconians. "What have I gotten myself into?" he muttered, running a hand through his hair. As if in response, the hatchling stirred in its sleep, making a soft, contented sound. Despite his anxiety, Miles found himself smiling. Whatever trouble he'd just invited into his life, he couldn't bring himself to regret helping the little creature. The following morning, Miles awoke to the sensation of something small and warm snuggling against his neck. He opened his eyes to find the hatchling had somehow escaped its nest and climbed onto his bed during the night. It was now curled up on his pillow, its long tail wrapped around itself, fast asleep. For a moment, Miles just watched it breathe, marveling at the way its scales shifted colors with each inhalation and exhalation, like oil on water. He'd never seen anything so beautiful or so alien. When the hatchling finally woke up, it greeted Miles with a chirp and a headbutt against his hand, apparently seeking attention. Following Dr. Krelzak's instructions, Miles prepared a breakfast of specially formulated protein paste mixed with small chunks of raw meat. The hatchling devoured it enthusiastically, then spent the next hour exploring every corner of Miles's small apartment, its curiosity seemingly boundless despite its injuries. You need a name, Miles said, watching as the hatchling attempted to climb his bookshelf, using its good wing and claws to hoist itself up. I can't just keep calling you Little One or Hatchling. The creature paused in its climbing endeavor to look back at him, head tilted inquisitively. Miles thought for a moment. How about Ember? You know, because dragons breathe fire and all that. The hatchling chirped and flicked its tail, which Miles decided to interpret as approval. Ember it is, then. With a day off from work, Miles had time to observe Ember and learn more about draconian behavior. Despite being a baby, Ember displayed remarkable intelligence, quickly figuring out how to open cabinet doors and turn on the faucet in the bathroom sink. It seemed particularly fascinated by running water, batting at the stream with its tiny claws and chirping excitedly. Miles also discovered that Ember had a mischievous streak. When he briefly stepped out to check his mail, he returned to find that the hatchling had somehow managed to unroll an entire roll of paper towels across his kitchen floor. Really? Miles said, hands on his hips as he surveyed the chaos. Ember, sitting in the middle of the paper towel destruction, merely chirped and wagged its tail, looking entirely too pleased with itself. By evening, Miles had child-proofed his apartment as best he could and established something resembling a routine with Ember. The hatchling seemed to be recovering well, moving more easily and showing less pain when its injured wing was touched. It had also become increasingly affectionate, following Miles from room to room and demanding to be held whenever he sat down. As he was preparing for bed, Miles received a message from Dr. Krelzak. Progress update. Have identified potential suspects in hatchling theft. Situation more complex than anticipated. Maintain current arrangement for now. Will contact when safe to proceed. Miles frowned at the vague message but sent a quick acknowledgement. Then, with Ember curled up on the pillow beside him, he drifted off to sleep, wondering what the doctor had discovered. The next day passed in a similar fashion, with Miles dividing his time between caring for Ember, researching draconians on his datapad, and anxiously checking for updates from Dr. Krelzak. The hatchling continued to improve, its wound healing rapidly thanks to the specialized gel. It had even started to exercise its injured wing, stretching it out carefully as if testing its range of motion. Miles found himself growing increasingly attached to Ember. There was something endearing about the little dragon's personality, curious, playful, and surprisingly affectionate. It had taken to perching on Miles's shoulder as he moved around the apartment, chirping commentary that he couldn't understand but found charming nonetheless. On the evening of the third day, just as Miles was beginning to worry about the lack of communication from Dr. Krelzak, his door chime sounded. Instantly alert, he scooped up Ember and tucked the hatchling into the pocket of his oversized hoodie. "Who is it?" he called, approaching the door cautiously. "Maintenance," a gruff voice replied. "We've had reports of a water leak in this section." Miles frowned. He hadn't reported any leaks, and his neighbors rarely interacted with building management. Something felt off. "I don't have any leaks," he said, not opening the door. "Maybe check next door?" There was a pause, then the sound of hushed voices. Miles took a step back, his heart rate accelerating. Ember, sensing his tension, stirred restlessly in his pocket. Suddenly, the door burst open, the lock mechanism failing under some kind of override device. Three figures pushed their way into the apartment. Two bulky Zentari, a reptilian species known for their strength and mercenary tendencies, and a slim human in an expensive suit. "Mr. Harper," the human said, smiling thinly. "I believe you have something that belongs to my employer." Miles backed away, one hand protectively covering the pocket where Ember was hidden. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's not waste time with denials. The hatchling has a tracking implant. We know it's here." He gestured to the Zentari. "Search the place." As the two reptilian mercenaries began to tear apart his apartment, Miles frantically considered his options. He couldn't fight. The Zentari were 3 times his size and strength. He couldn't run. They were blocking the only exit. His only hope was to somehow alert Dr. Krelzak or the authorities. "Why do you want the hatchling?" Miles asked, trying to keep the man talking while he edged toward the kitchen, where his communication device was charging. "Draconians guard their young fiercely. Stealing one is practically a declaration of war." The man shrugged. "The geopolitics of the situation are not my concern. I merely facilitate transactions for interested parties. And there are many parties very interested in acquiring draconian genetic material. Miles felt sick. He'd heard rumors about black market geneticists creating designer pets and bioweapons using DNA from endangered species. The thought of Ember being dissected for its genetic material was unbearable. "It's just a baby," Miles said, his voice strained. "It deserves to be with its own kind. Spare me the sentimentality, Harper. You're a janitor. This is far beyond your pay grade." The man checked his watch impatiently. "Hurry up," he called to the Zentari, who were systematically destroying Miles's belongings in their search. In his pocket, Ember was becoming increasingly agitated, making small sounds of distress that Miles feared would give away their location. He stroked the hatchling through the fabric, trying to soothe it while continuing to inch toward the kitchen. "We found the nest," one of the Zentari grunted, holding up the blankets Miles had arranged for Ember. But no hatchling. The human's expression hardened. "It's here somewhere." His gaze focused on Miles, narrowing suspiciously. "In fact, I think Mr. Harper knows exactly where it is." Miles lunged for the kitchen counter, grabbing his communication device. Before he could activate it, one of the Zentari was on him, powerful claws clamping around his arm. The device clattered to the floor, skidding under the refrigerator. "That was foolish," the human said, approaching with a small, sinister-looking device in his hand. "Now, I'll ask once, where is the hatchling?" Before Miles could respond, Ember made the decision for him. The hatchling erupted from his pocket in a blur of scales and fury, launching itself at the human's face. Despite its small size and injured wing, it moved with surprising speed and precision, claws extended and a high-pitched battle cry emerging from its throat. The man screamed, staggering backward as tiny claws raked across his cheek. "Get it off me." The Zentari holding Miles released him to help their employer, giving Miles a chance to act. He dove for the fallen communication device, his fingers just managing to brush against it. As he pulled it toward him, the second Zentari grabbed him by the ankle, dragging him away from his potential salvation. Miles kicked frantically, connecting with the Zentari's snout. The creature hissed in pain, but didn't release its grip. Across the room, Ember was putting up a valiant fight against the other Zentari, who was trying to capture the hatchling without harming it. The human was pressed against the wall, blood streaming from the scratches on his face, his expression a mixture of pain and rage. "Enough," he shouted, pulling out what looked like a small remote control. "Get away from the hatchling." Miles recognized the device with horror. It was a neural disruptor, illegal in most civilized sectors. The pain it could inflict was legendary. "I'm going to count to 3, the man said, his voice deadly calm. "If the hatchling is not in my hands by then, I will use this on Mr. Harper. From what I understand, the experience is quite memorable." Ember, perched on top of a bookshelf, hissed defiantly. 1. Miles struggled against the Zentari's grip, but it was useless. The creature was simply too strong. 2. As the man's finger hovered over the button, the apartment door burst open once again. This time, it was Dr. Krelzak who entered, accompanied by 4 imposing figures in the distinctive armor of the Galactic Security Force. "Federal agents," one of the officers barked. Everyone freeze. What happened next was a blur of activity. The Zentari released Miles and tried to flee, only to be subdued by the security officers. The human attempted to dispose of the neural disruptor, but was caught in the act and promptly arrested. Dr. Krelzak rushed to Miles's side, helping him to his feet. "Are you all right?" the doctor asked, his 6 eyes scanning Miles for injuries. Miles nodded, still trying to process what had just happened. "Ember," he gasped. "The hatchling." As if on cue, Ember glided down from the bookshelf, its injured wing functioning well enough for a controlled descent, and landed on Miles's shoulder. It chirped indignantly at the intruders as they were being led away in restraints. "Your little friend appears to be recovering well," Dr. Krelzak observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Miles gently stroked Ember's head, relieved beyond words that the hatchling was safe. "What happened? How did you know to come here?" The doctor's expression grew serious. "I've been monitoring the hatchling's tracking implant since you took it home. When I detected multiple unauthorized access attempts to its signal, I contacted the authorities." He glanced around at the wreckage of Miles's apartment. though I fear we may have arrived a bit later than optimal. Miles didn't care about his belongings. All that mattered was that Ember was safe. The hatchling nuzzled against his cheek, making a soft, purring sound that seemed to express similar sentiment. One of the security officers approached them, her expression stern. "Dr. Krelzak, we need to take your statement. And yours as well, Mr. Harper." Her gaze shifted to Ember. "The hatchling will need to be placed in protective custody until representatives from the Draconian embassy can arrive." Miles instinctively tightened his hold on Ember. "Is that necessary? It's still recovering from its injuries." The officer's expression softened slightly. "I understand your concern, but protocol is clear. This is a highly sensitive diplomatic situation." Before Miles could argue further, Dr. Krelzak intervened. "Perhaps a compromise? Mr. Harper has been providing excellent care for the hatchling, and it seems to have bonded with him. Separating them now could cause unnecessary stress. With your permission, I could monitor them both at my private medical facility until the Draconian representatives arrive." The officer considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, but they will remain under guard at all times." And so, Miles found himself being escorted to Dr. Krelzak's private clinic, Ember still perched contentedly on his shoulder. The facility was small but impeccably maintained, with state-of-the-art medical equipment and comfortable accommodations. "You'll be safe here," the doctor assured him, showing Miles to a room that had been hastily prepared for them. "The security officers will remain outside, and I've alerted the Draconian embassy. Their representatives should arrive by morning." Miles sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the day. "What's going to happen now?" "That depends largely on the Draconians," Dr. Krelzak said, checking Ember's wing with gentle hands. "They take matters involving their hatchlings extremely seriously." "Will I be in trouble?" Miles asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in the back of his mind. "For taking Ember from the hospital?" The doctor's multiple eyes blinked in their sequential pattern. "You acted to protect a vulnerable being from harm. I believe the Draconians will recognize and appreciate that fact." Miles wasn't so sure, but he was too exhausted to argue. After Dr. Krelzak left, he curled up on the bed with Ember nestled against his chest, the hatchling's rhythmic breathing eventually lulling him to sleep. He was awakened the next morning by Dr. Krelzak gently shaking his shoulder. "Miles, wake up. The Draconian representatives have arrived." Miles sat up groggily, disturbing Ember, who chirped in protest at being jostled from sleep. "Already? What time is it?" "Just past dawn. They came as soon as they received the alert." The doctor's voice was tense. "I should warn you, they've sent high-ranking officials. This situation is being treated with the utmost seriousness." Miles swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of his rumpled appearance and the fact that he was about to meet representatives of one of the most powerful species in the galaxy while wearing yesterday's clothes. "Can I at least wash up first? I'm afraid they're insistent on seeing the hatchling immediately," Dr. Krelzak said apologetically. With Ember once again perched on his shoulder, Miles followed the doctor to the clinic's conference room. He tried to stand tall, despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. Whatever happened next, he would face it with dignity. The conference room door slid open to reveal three tall, imposing Draconians. Unlike Ember, the adults were massive, standing nearly 7 feet tall on their hind legs, with fully developed wings folded neatly against their backs. Their scales shimmered with a metallic luster, and their golden eyes seemed to pierce right through Miles as he entered. "Ambassadors," Dr. Krelzak said, bowing respectfully. "Thank you for coming so quickly. May I present Miles Harper, the human who rescued the hatchling, the largest of the Draconians, whose scales were a deep, royal blue, stepped forward. I am Elder Thacker, Chief Diplomatic Envoy of the Draconian Clutch Council. These are my colleagues, Envoy Seraphina and Clutch Guardian Draken." Miles bowed awkwardly, not entirely sure of the proper protocol. "It's an honor to meet you." Elder Thacker's gaze shifted to Ember, who was watching the adult Draconians with obvious interest. "And this is the hatchling in question?" "Yes, Elder," Miles said, gently lifting Ember from his shoulder and holding the hatchling in his hands. "I've been calling it. I mean him or her, Ember." The three Draconians exchanged glances, communicating silently in a way that Miles couldn't interpret. Then, to his surprise, Elder Thacker knelt down to eye level with Ember. "Greetings, little one," the elder said, his deep voice softening. "You have had quite the adventure, haven't you?" Ember chirped excitedly, squirming in Miles's hands. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, the hatchling leaped from Miles's grasp onto Elder Thracker's outstretched arm. The two engaged in what appeared to be a complex communication of chirps, trills, and subtle movements. After several minutes, Elder Thacker straightened, Ember now perched comfortably on his massive forearm. "The hatchling has shared its experiences with me," he announced, his tone grave. "It confirms that it was taken from our embassy nursery 3 days ago by individuals it did not recognize, sedated, and transported to the medical facility where Mr. Harper found it." "Wait," Miles interrupted, forgetting protocol in his confusion. "Ember can communicate all that? But it's just a baby." The female Draconian, Envoy Seraphina, made a sound that might have been laughter. "Draconian hatchlings possess sophisticated telepathic abilities from birth, Mr. Harper. It is how they communicate with their clutch guardians and learn from their elders. The fact that this hatchling was able to establish a bond with you, despite your lack of telepathic ability, is remarkable." Miles blinked, processing this new information. "So, all this time, Ember has been trying to talk to me." "In a manner of speaking, yes," Elder Thacker confirmed. "Though without a telepathic connection, the communication would have been limited to emotional impressions and basic needs." Which explained why Miles had sometimes felt like he could understand what Ember wanted, despite the lack of shared language. He had attributed it to growing familiarity, but apparently, there had been a real, if limited, connection. "The hatchling also confirms that you protected it at great personal risk," Elder Thacker continued. "For this, the Draconian people are in your debt, Miles Harper." Miles shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't leave Ember, the hatchling, injured and alone." "You underestimate your actions," the third Draconian, Clutch Guardian Draken, spoke for the first time. His voice was rougher than the others, and his scarred scales suggested a history of combat. Many would have ignored the hatchling's plight or sought to profit from its discovery. You chose compassion and courage. There was a moment of silence as the three Draconians seemed to confer silently again. Then Elder Thacker made his pronouncement. "Miles Harper, in recognition of your service to the Draconian people, we would like to offer you a position within our embassy. The hatchling you rescued is of the royal lineage, one of only 7 born this decade. Such a hatchling requires a dedicated guardian during its formative years, someone it trusts implicitly." Miles stared, not quite processing what he was hearing. "You want me to look after Ember?" "Officially, the position of foster guardian is an ancient and honored role in our society," Envoy Seraphina explained. "Traditionally reserved for Draconians, but in this case, the hatchling has made its preference clear." Ember, as if understanding the conversation, chirped happily from Elder Thacker's arm, wings fluttering with excitement. "The position comes with comprehensive training, appropriate accommodations within our embassy compound, and, of course, substantial compensation," Elder Thacker continued. "You would be considered a diplomatic staff member, with all associated benefits and protections." Miles's mind reeled. From janitor to diplomatic staff in the Draconian embassy? It seemed impossible, like something from a dream. But as he looked at Ember, he knew his answer. "I accept," he said, his voice firm despite the surreal nature of the situation. "It would be my honor to continue caring for Ember. I mean, the hatchling." "Ember is a fitting name," Elder Thacker said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "It suits the hatchling's spirited nature." With that settled, the discussion turned to practical matters. The Draconians would arrange for Miles's immediate relocation to the embassy compound, where he would begin his training as foster guardian. Dr. Krelzak would continue to monitor Ember's recovery, and the Galactic Security Force would pursue their investigation into the attempted trafficking. As the meeting concluded, Ember leaped from Elder Thacker's arm back to Miles, climbing up to its now familiar perch on his shoulder. The hatchling nuzzled against his cheek, making that soft purring sound that Miles had come to associate with contentment. "I think you've made the right decision, Mr. Harper," Dr. Krelzak said as they left the conference room. "For both of you." Miles nodded, still trying to absorb the dramatic turn his life had taken. Just days ago, he had been an anonymous janitor, struggling to make ends meet. Now, he was about to become part of the diplomatic circle of one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. All because he couldn't ignore a small, injured creature in need. 2 weeks later, Miles stood on the balcony of his new apartment in the Draconian Embassy compound, watching as Ember practiced flying in the enclosed garden below. The hatchling's injured wing had healed completely, and it was now able to sustain flight for short periods, though its landings still needed work. The past 14 days had been a whirlwind of changes. Miles had resigned from his position at the hospital, moved into the luxurious accommodations provided by the Draconians, and begun an intensive education program on Draconian culture, history, and hatchling development. His new salary was more than 10 times what he had earned as a janitor, allowing him to immediately upgrade his mother's medical care to include the advanced treatments that had previously been financially out of reach. The investigation into the hatchling trafficking ring had led to multiple high-profile arrests, including several embassy staff members who had been bribed to look the other way. The human in the expensive suit, whose name turned out to be Julian Mercer, was a notorious black market broker with connections to numerous criminal organizations. Thanks to Miles's testimony and Dr. Krelzak's evidence, Mercer and his associates were facing charges that would likely keep them imprisoned for decades. Impressive progress, a voice said from behind him. Miles turned to find envoy Serafina approaching, her elegant form silhouetted against the setting sun. Unlike their first meeting, when she had been formal and somewhat intimidating, she now greeted him with a familiar nod. Ember's a quick learner, Miles agreed, turning back to watch as the hatchling executed a wobbly loop-de-loop, chirping triumphantly. "As are you," Serafina said, moving to stand beside him at the railing. "Your instructors speak highly of your dedication to understanding our ways." Miles shrugged, somewhat embarrassed by the praise. "It's fascinating, and I want to do right by Ember. I still can't believe you're trusting me with this responsibility." "The hatchling chose you, Miles Harper. In our culture, such a bond is sacred." She paused, watching as Ember spotted them on the balcony and began flying in their direction. "Besides, you've proven your character through your actions." Ember landed on the balcony railing, chirping excitedly and projecting a sense of accomplishment that Miles could now faintly perceive. His telepathic training was in its early stages, but he was gradually becoming more receptive to Ember's emotional communications. "Well done," Miles praised, stroking the hatchling's head. "You're getting better every day." Serafina observed their interaction with approval. "Elder Thacker wishes to see you both tomorrow morning. I believe he has news regarding Ember's formal presentation ceremony." The presentation ceremony was a significant event in Draconian culture where a hatchling was formally introduced to society and its lineage acknowledged. Miles had been studying the protocols diligently, determined not to embarrass himself or Ember during the proceedings. "We'll be ready," Miles assured her. After Serafina departed, Miles sat on one of the plush outdoor chairs, Ember curling up contentedly in his lap. As the hatchling drifted off to sleep, Miles reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them together. From a chance encounter in a maintenance closet to becoming part of the royal hatchling's life, it had been a transformation beyond anything he could have imagined. And though the path ahead would undoubtedly hold challenges, cultural differences to navigate, protocols to master, and the ongoing responsibility of raising a being from an ancient and powerful species, Miles wouldn't trade it for anything. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Miles made a silent promise to Ember and to himself. He would embrace this new life with the same courage and compassion that had led him to rescue the hatchling in the first place. Together, they would forge a bond that transcended species, a friendship that would grow stronger as Ember matured into the magnificent creature it was destined to become. The poor human janitor who had rushed a dragon hatchling to the hospital had found not just a new job or a new home, but a new purpose. And in doing so, he had changed not only his own life, but potentially the relationship between humans and Draconians for generations to come. Because sometimes, the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs don't happen in Grand Council chambers or during formal negotiations. Sometimes, they happen when one being simply chooses to help another, without expectation of reward or recognition. In that simple act of kindness, Miles Harper had unwittingly opened a door to possibilities that neither humans nor Draconians had previously considered. As if sensing his thoughts, Ember stirred in his sleep, a soft purring emanating from the hatchling's throat. Miles smiled, gently stroking the iridescent scales that now felt as familiar to him as his own skin. "Sleep well, little one," he whispered. "We've got a big day tomorrow." The next morning, Miles stood nervously in the antechamber of the Grand Hall, dressed in formal attire specifically designed for his role as foster guardian. The deep blue robes, embroidered with silver thread and patterns that represented his connection to the royal hatchling, felt strange after a lifetime of simple, practical clothing. Ember, freshly bathed and scales polished to a brilliant shine, perched on a specially designed harness attached to Miles's shoulder. The hatchling was uncharacteristically subdued, seemingly aware of the importance of the occasion. "Remember the protocols," Miles muttered to himself, going through the ceremonial sequence in his head for the 100th time. "Bow to the elders, present Ember to the assembly, recite the guardian's oath." "You will do fine, Miles Harper," Elder Thacker said, entering the antechamber with his usual dignified bearing. "The ceremony is but a formality. The true guardian bond has already been established." Miles took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. "I just don't want to embarrass Ember or the Draconian people." "Your concern for our customs does you credit," the elder said, his golden eyes warm with approval. "But perhaps I should inform you of one additional aspect of today's ceremony that we have not previously discussed." Miles tensed. "There's more." "Indeed. The foster guardian traditionally receives a gift from the hatchling's clutch family. In Ember's case, as a royal hatchling, that gift comes from the Draconian government itself." "That's really not necessary," Miles began, but Elder Thacker held up a clawed hand to silence him. "It is both necessary and appropriate. You have done our people a great service, one that cannot be measured merely in material compensation." The elder's expression grew solemn. "We have chosen a gift that we believe addresses your most pressing concern." Before Miles could ask what the elder meant, the massive doors to the Grand Hall began to open, signaling that it was time for the ceremony to begin. Elder Thacker moved to his position, leaving Miles to wonder what unexpected surprise awaited him. The Grand Hall was filled with Draconians of all ages, their scales creating a shimmering sea of color as they stood to acknowledge the entrance of the foster guardian and royal hatchling. Miles walked slowly down the central aisle, careful to maintain the dignified pace he had practiced, while Ember sat tall and proud on his shoulder. At the far end of the hall, the Clutch Council, 12 of the oldest and most respected Draconians, watched from elevated seats. Beside them, to Miles's surprise, stood Dr. Krelzak and, even more unexpectedly, his mother. Miles nearly faltered in his ceremonial walk. His mother looked healthier than he had seen her in years, standing straight and smiling broadly, with no sign of the pain that had become her constant companion during her illness. When Miles reached the ceremonial circle at the center of the hall, Elder Thacker stepped forward to address the assembly. "Today, we witness the formal recognition of a bond rarely seen in our history, that between a royal hatchling and a guardian of another species. This unprecedented relationship symbolizes the evolving nature of our place in the galactic community and offers new possibilities for understanding between our peoples." The elder turned to face Miles directly. "Miles Harper, do you accept the sacred responsibility of foster guardian to the royal hatchling Ember, to guide, protect, and nurture until the age of flight is achieved?" "I do," Miles replied, his voice steady despite the emotion welling within him. "Do you swear to uphold the traditions of the Draconian people, to teach our ways while honoring the unique perspective you bring as a human guardian?" "I do." "And do you pledge your loyalty to the hatchling above all other considerations, recognizing that this bond transcends ordinary diplomatic or personal relationships?" Miles looked at Ember, who was watching him with those intelligent golden eyes. "I do with all my heart." Elder Thacker nodded, satisfied. "Then, by the authority of the Clutch Council, I formally recognize the guardian bond between Miles Harper of Earth and royal hatchling Ember of the Celestial Clutch." The assembly erupted in a chorus of trilling sounds that Miles had come to recognize as Draconian applause. Ember chirped happily, fluttering its wings in excitement. And now, Elder Thacker continued once the hall had quieted. As is tradition, we present the Guardian's gift. He gestured toward Miles's mother, who stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears of joy. The most advanced medical treatment available in the galaxy, Elder Thacker explained. Your mother's illness has been completely eradicated, Miles Harper. She will live a long and healthy life, free from pain and the threat of recurrence. Miles felt his knees weaken. The medical treatments he had been able to afford with his new salary had been helping, but the complete cure had remained frustratingly out of reach, requiring specialized draconian medical technology not generally available to humans. This is too much, he whispered, overcome with emotion. It is nothing compared to what you have given us, Elder Thacker replied. The life of a royal hatchling, the exposure of a criminal enterprise that threatened our species, and a new perspective on the potential of human-draconian relations. Miles's mother approached, embracing him carefully so as not to disturb Ember. They told me everything, she said softly. I'm so proud of you, Miles. As mother and son shared their emotional reunion, Ember chirped and nudged Miles's cheek, projecting feelings of happiness and belonging that Miles could now perceive more clearly thanks to his ongoing telepathic training. The ceremony concluded with a feast celebrating the newly recognized bond, with dishes from both draconian and human cultures. Miles found himself at the center of attention, with numerous draconians approaching to express their approval of Ember's unusual guardian. Dr. Krelzak joined Miles as the festivities were winding down. It seems my recommendation was more consequential than I anticipated, the Viridian physician said, his 6 eyes twinkling with amusement. From hospital janitor to diplomatic sensation in a matter of weeks. Miles chuckled, watching as Ember played with several other hatchlings in a designated area nearby. Life takes strange turns sometimes. Indeed it does. And speaking of turns, I have been offered a position as the chief medical liaison between the Interspecies Medical Center and the Draconian Embassy, largely thanks to my involvement in this affair. Dr. Krelzak's tone was nonchalant, but Miles could tell he was pleased. Congratulations, Doctor. It's well-deserved. As the celebration continued around them, Miles took a moment to reflect on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. A chance encounter in a maintenance closet, a decision made from simple compassion, and a bond formed across species lines had not only changed his life, but potentially the relationship between humans and draconians for generations to come. In the days, months, and years that followed, Miles would face countless challenges and adventures as Ember's guardian. There would be cultural misunderstandings to navigate, diplomatic incidents to resolve, and the ongoing responsibility of raising a being from an ancient and powerful species. But he would approach each new challenge with the same courage and compassion that had led him to rescue Ember in the first place. And as Ember grew from a vulnerable hatchling into a magnificent adult draconian, their bond would only strengthen, transcending the differences between their species to forge a friendship that would become legendary throughout the Galactic Federation. The poor human janitor who had rushed a dragon hatchling to the hospital had found not just a new job or a new home, but a new purpose. In doing so, he had changed not only his own life, but the lives of countless others, proving that sometimes the most profound impact comes from the simplest acts of kindness. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.